You're listening to the Radius Church podcast, recorded live each Sunday in North Hollywood, California.
We've said throughout this series that we are not going to tell you how to vote. I think that would be confusing. I think it'd be irresponsible. I think it betrays the privilege of getting to serve in a faith community that I guarantee is going to vote in every which direction this November and have good reasons to do so. But today, I think I'm going to tell you how to vote. But let's start with Jesus, right? I think we should. How would Jesus vote? Maybe it's a question that you've thought of before. And I want to see if we can piece it together. If Jesus had to vote in the upcoming election, how do you think he would vote? I'm going to go to a political moment in Jesus' life. And in order to understand it, let me give you just a little bit of a setup. This happened on a Sabbath day, and keeping the Sabbath was the distinguishing mark for the Jewish people, for God's people. And Jesus is a Jewish man. The Sabbath was a day of worship and rest. No work was allowed. And that kind of helps set the scene. That's the backdrop for this one particular Sabbath in Jesus' life. And it starts with Jesus doing on that Sabbath day what every Jew was doing on the Sabbath day. Mark's biography of Jesus starts off this encounter like this. Jesus went into the synagogue again, and he noticed a man with a deformed hand. Now, we don't know if this was something he had from birth. We don't know if this was an injury, but his condition was not a secret. It was on his hand, and customarily, people would raise and lower their hands during prayer, so everyone would have known that this guy had some sort of a malformed hand or a deformed hand. Since it was the Sabbath, Jesus' enemies watched him closely. If he healed the man's hand, they planned to accuse him of working on the Sabbath. Now, here's some people who are going to a religious service to do what a lot of people do when they go to religious services, and that is just to reinforce what they already believe to be true, right? Reinforce their prejudices. What's remarkable about that, though, is what they were on the lookout for was some sort of a way to trip up Jesus because they felt his influence was endangering them or endangering the influence they wanted to have in the world. And if they were going to find him slipping up or crossing a line, what's remarkable to me is that they would have absolutely missed the significance of him healing a man. Like if you were in a room and somebody miraculously healed someone, that would probably be the most memorable moment, but not these guys because they are trying to reinforce their confirmation bias and they can't see anything else. Well, here's how the encounter goes on. Jesus said to the man with the deformed hand, "Come and stand in front of everyone." And it wasn't to make a spectacle of the man, but Jesus did want everybody to see him. He wanted everybody to pay attention to him. He wanted everybody to think about his condition. Of all the people in that synagogue, this was the guy that Jesus put front and center. And it might have been because they have seen the man before, but they didn't want to keep noticing him. This was the kind of man that might have made many uncomfortable. At the time, they superstitiously believed that his condition was the result of some way he messed up or his parents messed up. So this was someone who can kind of, stay to himself, that they don't have to interact with. They don't want to be infected with whatever has infected him. So Jesus says, he turns to his critics and he asks, does the law permit good deeds on the Sabbath, or is it a day for doing evil? Is this a day to save life or destroy it? And you'd think that'd be a simple question to answer, but it says they wouldn't answer him. And why didn't they answer him? Let me pose this question in a different way. Jesus essentially asks, okay, if this Sabbath is a day that's dedicated to God, how do you think God would want us to celebrate him? Would he want us to celebrate him by doing all the good that we can do for people, or by withholding some of the good that we could do for people? And put him in a spot. Be easier for them to just keep their mouth shut and see if Jesus makes a false move. He looked around at them angrily and was deeply saddened by their hard hearts. He was angry not because he had his feelings hurt. He wasn't offended, I don't think. He was angry because Jesus hated evil, and he saw evil here. He saw self-righteousness here, and he hated that. But he also had this tension because he felt deeply saddened at the people who were standing opposed to him, thinking differently than him. He was saddened. Why? I think it's because he cared for them. He wanted better for them. So he was mad, rightfully so, and he was saddened. So then he said to the man with the deformed hand, "Hold out your hand." So the man held out his hand, and it was restored. At once the Pharisees, those are the guys trying to catch Jesus, went away and met with the supporters of Herod to plot how to kill Jesus. Before this moment, they already knew what they thought of Jesus. They already had him branded, and they already knew what they wanted to do. This just gave him the smoking gun. This was the dirt that they needed to do a character assassination and a real assassination to this man. Seeing this, the religious fundamentalists, and that is how we could characterize these guys, the religious fundamentalists can now say, oh, so you're not on our side, right? I know how you'd vote. Not so fast. If we were to zoom out and see the rest of Jesus' life, we realize Jesus didn't write off the religious fundamentalists or the religious elite. There's this one moment, another time in Jesus' life where he has this powerful interaction with a Jewish leader named Nicodemus. Nicodemus invited the interaction, the conversation with Jesus. He wanted it to happen in the middle of the night because he was afraid of the assumptions that his tribe was going to make about this, about how that might damage his brand among the people that he had influence with. And then when people find out about this interaction that Jesus had with Nicodemus, now they might say like, okay, well, maybe it's not as clean cut. Maybe you're just on the side of Jewish people, right? Now I know how you'd vote. Not so fast. There's this other moment in Jesus' life. He has an interaction with a Samaritan woman. And in case you don't know the tension that exists between Samaritans and Jewish people, she says it for us in John's biography of Jesus, chapter 4. The woman was surprised, for Jews refused to have anything to do with Samaritans. So she said to Jesus, a Jewish man, "You are a Jew, and I am a Samaritan woman. Why are you asking me for a drink?" Because they were at a well, and he was asking her to give him a drink of water. Now that conversation goes on, and Jesus is about to lay down some of the thickest, most powerful theology that he had to that point in his life. She's the first one to hear Jesus actually claim to be the Savior of the world. That's a big reveal to somebody who's outside of his political party. Okay. So maybe Jesus, you're not just on the side of Jewish people, but maybe you're on the side of religious people. Okay, so now maybe that's how you would vote. Not so fast. Another moment in Jesus' life, there's this Roman soldier, and he's one of the bad guys, and certainly not a religious person the way that Jewish people or even Samaritan adherents would consider religious people. He's definitely on the outside, but this bad guy, quote unquote, comes up to Jesus and asks him to heal one of his servants. Jesus agrees, "I'll heal one of your servants." And the man says, "Jesus, I am not worthy for you to visit my house." To which a lot of people listening in would have said, "Yeah, we totally agree, Jesus. This guy is scum of the earth." So Jesus actually honors that man's perspective or his nerves, and he heals the servant, sort of like social distance style, heals the servant. And then within earshot of all of the people who thought that this was a really awkward moment and might have thought they had Jesus pegged, Jesus says this in Matthew chapter 8, "I tell you the truth, this bad guy here, I haven't seen faith like this in all of Israel." Okay, I don't get it. I don't get it, Jesus. Like, whose side are you on? How would you vote? You know, going back to the story of the man with the deformed hand, I don't know if you thought about this, but Jesus didn't have to heal that guy on the Sabbath. Think about it. This was not like a life-threatening situation. The guy had likely had that challenge for quite some time, if not his whole life. If Jesus wanted to heal this guy, he could have done it on Wednesday. He didn't have to do it on a Sabbath. I think Jesus placed that moment here to make a point. And it wasn't just about self-righteousness and people who think they've figured out how to work in the world so they can keep other people out who think differently. Jesus was here to make a point about God. The Sabbath was meant to tell us about God, what's important to God. And if we read Matthew's account of the same story, in Matthew's biography of Jesus, he includes some additional words that Jesus spoke in Matthew chapter 12. "Listen, people, if you had a sheep that fell into a well on the Sabbath, wouldn't you work to pull it out? Of course you would. And how much more valuable is a person than a sheep?" All right, fine. But Jesus, what side are you on? How would you vote? And I think Jesus might respond, well, I'm here on the Sabbath healing this person because I believe God is on the side of people. So if you want to know what side I'm on the side of people. And if that's what Jesus was going to say, then I can almost hear the religious and the irreligious and the progressive and the traditional and the liberal and the conservative and the Republicans and the Democrats and the libertarians and the independents all in unison saying, exactly, us too. We're on the side of people. And I think this is why it's so frustratingly hard to peg Jesus and figure out how he would vote if given the choices that were given this election year. If you pay attention to the earliest Jesus followers, they were committed to all sides of the aisle, it would seem. They had a radical commitment to racial justice and gender equality and the poor. That is like bleeding heart liberal. But then they were also committed to stewardship and to celibacy. Oh, that's oppressively conservative. Friends, throughout history, Jesus followers have historically looked like radicals on all sides of every political aisle. Well, you might say, Christians have a real identity crisis here then. They have a real struggle. They have a real branding issue here. Can they just make up their minds? I think the truth is, whether you are a Jesus follower, you adhere to a different faith, or you're not sure what you think about your spiritual life right now, the truth is you are a human. And I think deep down, most of us care about people. Now, I believe that is the imprint of the image of God on you. But the fact remains that most of us want what's best for people. And even if right now you're mostly concerned about your own life and your own future as you look forward to this election, keep in mind you are people. I think we all want, or at least most of us want, what is best for people. So Joseph, if that's true, then how come that same motive that unites all of us can lead to such seemingly contradictory conclusions in the ballot box? How is that possible? Well, the truth is, I think we all vote differently, not just for different candidates, but for different reasons, with a different strategy. This is how you are going to vote, whether you know it or not. A friend of mine, brilliant leader, she's an educational leader. Her name's Jackie. Hi, Jackie. She, one time, just in casual conversation, was telling us something that she teaches her staff about how we trust or distrust people. Or another way to look at it is how you earn trust or you damage trust with people. And she used her hand to illustrate these different ways that we trust or we hire or we vote for people. And I think she made this up. Maybe she didn't. I'm sure the internet will tell me in moments here. But she said, first of all, we trust people based on their competency. And she pointed to her pinky finger. And of all the ways that we trust people, this actually is the least significant, but you wouldn't want it cut off. You want to know that this person can do the job that you're about to vote for them for or you're about to hire them for. The pinky was competency. She said another reason that we trust or distrust people is based on what we think of their commitment. And she pointed to her ring finger. Is this someone who's going to see it through to the end as far as we can tell? We trust their commitment to the task at hand. We distrust their level of commitment to the task. She used her thumb to talk about direction. That's another reason that we trust or distrust or vote for people, that their plan is going in the way I think things should go, in the way that I hope our country moves. They're going in the right direction. I trust the direction that they're going to be taking us. I trust the plan. And then she pointed to her index finger, and she said this, if you used both of your pointer fingers, this is alignment. We trust people if they are aligned with what we think the purpose of the role is. Why are they doing this? What is the purpose of that position? And if we think we're aligned with them, that's another reason we might trust or distrust somebody. Now, I have a little bit of a political background. I was elected as the ASB president of my small high school. There's 41 people in my graduating class, so it really wasn't, much of an accomplishment. But still, I was voted as the ASB president, and I had no competency whatsoever. But I think they agreed on my direction that I was going to take the high school because my platform was adding nachos for lunch. That was my platform. I was voted in by a landslide, and would you know it, we got that nacho legislation passed. It's a proud moment in my life. Now, there's one more finger. There's one more way that Jackie illustrated that we trust or distrust people. And she pointed to the longest one, your middle finger, and she said, character. It's the tallest one. It is the tent pole. It's the most significant feature that we trust in someone or we distrust in someone. Now, I think you might agree that character is the most important. In fact, some of you might say it is the only thing that drives how you vote, is the perceived character of the person that you're voting for. And I think that's applaudable. I think that character should be the most important. I think if someone lacks character, it does not matter how they excel in all of the other areas. That would undermine the whole thing. That could spell disaster, right? And I also encourage you to be consistent in your character scrutiny. So don't just scrutinize the character of someone who is categorically different than your political history or your political leanings. Scrutinize the character of everyone who you might be voting to give responsibility to. But I also want to expand our thinking to realize that it's not the only reason that we trust somebody. It's not the only reason that we vote for somebody. It's not the only reason that we hire somebody, right? It's not the only reason that you trust someone with your car or with your plumbing or with your accounting or even with your child's education. For instance, you need competency in those areas. Like someone can have exceptional character but have no idea how to wire your house. Do not hire that electrician. They need competency. Character is not the only way that I could earn your vote if I was running for office. It's just not. In fact, there are times when character actually takes a significant back seat to some other priorities that you have because you want what you think best for people. I'll bet there are instances where the direction that a candidate wants to take us supplants or at least reduces the priority of character for that candidate. And if you think that you're so morally enlightened that you would never consider this, I just want to offer that I bet that there is a reform or there is a law or there is some sort of a plan for our country that you would like to see upheld or you would like to see enacted or pushed forward because you think it is best for people and you're so passionate about that you would be willing to vote for someone of questionable character if they were the only available candidate promising to move our country in that direction. Sometimes alignment, right, of the purpose of the role sometimes reduces the importance of character or might even match the importance that we place in the character of somebody that we're voting for. For instance, you might think that because of the state of the union right now, that the financial purpose of government, we really need to lean into that right now. And so that might be more prominent for you because you think that's what's best for people. You might also think because of the state of global affairs right now that the inspirational or the cultural role of government is something we have to lean into right now. I think people need more of that right now, or I think it would be better for people right now if we had that. And you might be willing to press into that even more and might even overlook some of the character flaws or historic moral shortcomings of somebody if you felt like they were a better inspirational or cultural leader for our country. All of this, I don't think is profound. You've probably thought through these details. You could probably come up with other examples for this, but I say all of this just to illustrate that so much unites us in our motives for why we elect, why we vote, why we hire, why we trust. For the most part, we all want what's best for people. Where there's tension is that we just disagree on what we think is best for people. That's why I'm so frustrated, and I'm sure you are too, with this unimaginative calcification of our world into tidy little categories. Good guys and bad guys, and for or against. It is a fundamentalism that exists on all sides of the political spectrum, and I've seen it for years. I was a door-to-door salesman for one day in college. That's how effective I was at the job. And I'll never forget, I was selling coupon books for local restaurants. And I was in this one particular neighborhood, and there was a gentleman who was not even, he was outside in the front yard, so I didn't have to knock on his door. He was just outside watering his roses, I remember. And I got about halfway through my pitch when he blurts out, "This must be a Christian company." And it caught me off guard. It was not a Christian company. I happened to be a Christian, but I didn't understand what that had to do with. He's like, "It's got to be a Christian company because all of these coupons are buy one, get one free. These coupons are for couples, and Christians hate single people." I had never heard that particular doctrine before. I was a single person. I didn't realize how much I was supposed to hate myself. Maybe the last single person we loved was Jesus. I have no idea. No, this guy's response came from some sort of an experience, right? Some story that led him to batch what he thought of a certain kind of person and retaliate and react against the profile that he imagined in his mind. But you know what? That it's not as extreme as it might sound. I still see this, I still hear this often. Whenever somebody says or tweets something like, these are the same people who, you'll see that phrase all the time, especially in the next few months. These are the same people who, this is the same kind of thinking that leads to, this is evidence of a deep confirmation bias. It's partly why I am increasingly concerned, and I think you should be too, at the omnipresence of algorithms in our online experience. And I know this doesn't sound like much of a sermon, but I think this is part of your spiritual formation. These algorithms are threatening our ability to think freely and think compassionately and think creatively. You know this, I'm not informing you of anything new, but algorithms drive your entire experience on Amazon and Spotify and Netflix and YouTube and Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and TikTok, just to name a few. What those algorithms are designed to do is to help you see what they assume you already want to see based on what you've already seen before. And the reason they do that is because if you see what you want, it means more clicks, and more clicks somewhere down the line means more bucks. Algorithms are not designed to challenge our biases. They depend on them. So this isn't helping our confirmation bias that all of us have. If we're just fed an ongoing abundant dose of, because you believe this, you must also like this, because you voted for her or for him, then you also might want to buy this. It is only going to continue calcifying and concretizing this binary thinking that is a tragedy in our world. Now, I'm going to say something that I firmly believe, and some of you might not like it. You might stop watching right now. I hope you stick with me, but I've just come to be convicted about this fact. If you right now are unwilling to consider that someone who votes differently than you, just based on that alone, is not just as morally careful, thoughtful, intelligent, or is not as woke as you think they need to be, then my friend, listen, you are more of a problem for the future of our nation than the wrong candidate getting elected. And you are what Proverbs and Socrates and Jesus would call a fool. Now, if you're still with me, thanks. But I also want to be helpful. How can we all avoid the foolishness of this kind of binary thinking, this confirmation bias? How can we start to see people behind the positions? Well, if we want to avoid this, if we want to stop being foolish, here's what we do about it. We have to trade in our binary, echo chamber, package deal thinking. We have to trade in our confirmation bias for something I'm going to call a consideration bias. Doesn't that sound good? A consideration bias. Now, I'd like to consider myself a considerate person, but we can't go on thinking we are considerate if we do not regularly practice the art of considering the perspective, story, fear, values, motives of some people who have a different story than us, a different vote than us. We have to consider perspectives that are not our own. And in order to do this, we have got to stop letting the compassion that we all have, the desire we all have for what is best for people, to be politically branded. We have to stop it. You know, you'll hear someone say, you should have more compassion for women. Oh, they must lean left. You hear someone say, hey, I think we should have more compassion for the unborn. Oh, she must lean right. Or someone saying we should have compassion for minorities. Oh, he leans left. Compassion for first responders, right. Compassion for immigrants, left. Compassion for veterans, right. We are so afraid of a slippery slope. And so it's become simpler for us to just identify politically, right? And then batch everyone as with us or against us. I understand the fear in considering a side that is not your own, expanding your thinking and considering some of the compassionate ideas of the other side of the aisle. And as you slip into that, all of us are afraid from time to time that that might slip us into a brand that we are not comfortable with, or we would be associated with other political thoughts that we don't align with. Because unfortunately for us, we live in an age when, for the most part, we're given one of two options in which to politically make our voices heard. But my friends, we don't have to be afraid of the slope. because I think there's some truth to be found on the slope. If we would be willing to glide out of our high positions of fear into the stories and experiences of other people, we are not only going to expand our thinking, change our minds, but we will deepen our compassion. I think this is a good idea for everyone, but followers of Jesus, let me be direct with you. We have all the reason in the world to have this nuanced thinking, this paradoxical approach to humanity. Because our allegiance is not to a red elephant or a blue donkey, it is to a lamb who was slain to rescue people. The compassion of Jesus does not know party lines. And what it means is every single person who comes into our path, who comes into our radius, is God's assignment to us, regardless of their lifestyle, their culture, their orientation, their economic status, their challenges, their successes, how they vote. Every single person is worth loving to death. Jesus proved it, and we must be known for that more than anything else. People are not positions. And it takes real political brilliance to recognize that. So I want us to embrace a consideration bias this election year. A habit, a lifestyle, a routine of slowing down with the individual who may think or vote differently than us and explore the perspective and the motives and the stories behind that vote, so that we may see the person behind the position and find in that a deep compassion. And we might actually discover what's truly marvelous about each other. And I think we'll meet Jesus there. Let me pray for us. God, as I reflect on the midterm elections and the last presidential election, I mourn. I grieve for the distance between who we could be and who we are right now. A people who often err on the side of being right or winning rather than the side of nuance and paradox, the side of compassion, curiosity, and love. God, what are we so afraid of? May we trust you first, follow you first, so that as we make our voices heard and as we cast a vote, what a privilege it is to do that, that we would not so quickly assume that that tells our entire story, nor does it tell someone else's. God, make us smart. Make us slow to speak, slow to become angry, slow to assume. God, may we not be a people driven by our confirmation bias any longer, but a people who have faith and courage to live in the gray, in the paradox of a consideration bias, to see the person behind the position. God, that is where you are. You see the real us. That's who you love. Help us to see each other as we truly are, because that's who we want to love. That's how we want to be loved. Jesus, we pray this in your authority, because you ultimately are in charge of it all. Amen.
Thank you for listening. For more information, follow us on social media at Radius Church LA and visit us on the web at radius.la.